Hello, my fellow galactic senators. Today we are discussing the plot details of the Ahsoka Show, the plan Disney has for more sequel trilogy content, and the mysterious bacta tank character in Jedi Survivor. Join us on this episode of Star Wars Politics.
I love democracy.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Star Wars Politics. I'm Ryan, joined by Wayne, as always. How are you doing, Wayne?
Hello there, everyone. I'm doing well.
So today we're going to discuss a few new things out there about Star Wars. A lot of cool things, a lot of new things, the direction of Star Wars, and I say we just jump right into it. So the news out there is really primarily about, I guess you would say, the Ahsoka Show and kind of where we might be going in terms of a plot in the Ahsoka Show.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like Dave Filoni has prepared us this new place has never been discussed nor explored in Star Wars canon or legends, I think, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're going. So it's called the New Beyond. I don't know if that's the official name or if that's just the name that people are giving it right now, but for this episode, we're going to be calling it the New Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it sounds like it's a place that has never been explored in Star Wars before, has a group of people that experience the Force, but experience the Force differently than what we've previously had in Star Wars canon and Star Wars legends.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, it's the place that Ezra, Bridger, and Thrawn end up as a result of the ending of Rebels. And, you know, I was listening to some recent interviews last night with Dave Filoni, and Dave was very clear that Ezra and Thrawn did not die after the season finale of Rebels. Like, we know they're out there somewhere, and it looks like we're getting our first glimpse of where they're going to be. So let's make that our first talking point here. What are your thoughts on this New Beyond coming to Star Wars? Immediate thoughts.
My reaction to that is excitement, because we have been we have been
anticipating,
not anticipating, but like we've been kind of bogged down with Kenobi and with Boba Fett and with a lot of other shows, even like the sequels and even other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can't seem to get out of the Star Wars universe. And yes, there is the Outer Rim, I think that's what it's called, or the unknown regions of the Outer Rim or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We have that, and we still haven't gone there necessarily, but Star Wars has become kind of closed off in a way. There's no like necessarily world building anymore.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's really exciting to see Dave or just anyone try and come up with a new concept for Star Wars, which kind of goes into my other point, is that it's gonna go. Well, Dave said it. Like, I think you talked about maybe in a couple of other episodes that we did, like, this is going to be a quote-unquote religious experience watching Ahsoka, and it's kind of exciting in that way, just getting new places, not necessarily new characters maybe, but just like a new face of like, oh, this is where the galaxy is now. Which I think that's what Star Wars needs. It's kind of not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but expanding upon the wheel.
Yeah.
And that, like, you can always kind of improve it, but you can't wreck the foundation of it. That's kind of what this is going to be. So that's kind of my thoughts. I think it's good.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with reinvent the wheel, because and I don't know if I mentioned this right away, but it does sound like the Force users in this not unknown region, we're calling it the New Beyond because the unknown regions technically already exist.
Yeah.
But these people in this region are Force users who have experienced the Force differently and supposedly use it more in terms of magic.
Yeah.
And per my understanding of Star Wars canon so far, anytime the Force is used as magic, it's usually dark side.
Yeah.
You have the Night Sisters who use the Force as magic. You have
Palpatine who in Rebels used it for in a World Between Worlds.
Well, not only that, he uses it in the World Between Worlds, but if you remember in the Clone Wars, he also stirs, like he manifests some dark side power magic with Count Dooku. It's kind of like, it's very like quick in one episode, but like they're like in a very dark room with like a pot. Like you'll have to go back and I don't know which episode it is, but YouTube. But like they manifest the same magic you see in Rebels. Him and Dooku manifest it in Clone Wars. And so I think this place, like, because the dichotomy of the Force is the light and the dark, right? And so if you're telling me that there's magic, it leans me to think that these are going to be dark side Force users in this new place.
What I'm excited about it is, I guess another thing is it's going to kind of feel like what we know.
Mm-hmm.
It's again kind of reinventing the wheel because you have the Wills that I feel like was something really new and really fresh at the time Clone Wars came out, and that kind of like, oh, it's expanding upon it. You have the Mortis arc, which once again they experience the Force in different ways than, and then you have I'm trying to think of another thing. I think that's really all the
Bendu. I mean, in a sense, yeah.
Bendu in a sense. So yeah, and then of course you have the Night Sisters, like you said. Like it's going to kind of be a version of them. At least that's what the trades are saying. According to the article or whatever. So. And
I'm really excited about that. And I think what's even more exciting is it's going to be coming in the Ahsoka show, which is fantastic. You know, like the thing about the Ahsoka show is that this could have easily been some throwaway. Like you have Ahsoka Tano in it, you could do anything with this show and it would probably be decent. I say that, but then you have shows like Kenobi. But still, Ahsoka's awesome. But the fact that they're taking it in this direction in particular sets. I mean, obviously we talked about this in our last episode, but this has now set Ahsoka as the #1 show that I'm obviously anticipating.
Yeah.
But I say that because apparently Skeleton Crew, which is a new show, a new show that is in development. They're filming and everything. It's not in development. But they're filming. It's a newer show on the slate, per our knowledge as Star Wars fans. Apparently, they're saying that show is #1, the equivalent to Stranger Things in Star Wars, which I think is fantastic. I love Stranger Things. And Stranger Things does really well. So when you put Stranger Things and Star Wars together, it's probably bound to be successful. But it's also, have you heard about this? Like okay, so we're expecting Skeleton Crew apparently to be a group of kids, which is why it's like Stranger Things, but somehow they get lost in this new beyond, which is why it's tying into Ahsoka. So we could potentially see them show up in the Ahsoka series if Ahsoka finds them and has to help them get back home.
Interesting.
But we could also see, I think, Ahsoka pop into their show if she potentially, again, the one helping them get home.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about, I've heard it thrown around a little bit, and it's something that you and I have talked about a lot, but I want to make sure we talk about it here, is I think it's almost guaranteed, because we've talked about how if this place uses the Force as magic, which is more of a dark side power, I think it's almost a guarantee at this point that Ezra Bridger turns to the dark side and is a dark side Force user. What do you think about that?
I want Ezra to be a dark side. I mean, I think that's the whole I think that's the whole setup for the show is Ahsoka trying to find Ezra, not realizing where he's necessarily at because she doesn't know anything that happened in Rebels necessarily at the end.
Right.
So her trying to go find him, and then us as fans knowing that'd be like a cool setup for a duel. Like at least in my eyes, like it'd be a cool fight to see, and it would make the show a lot more interesting than just being like, well, we're going after Thrawn and he's not a Force user and all this. It's like,
I mean,
you have the one Force user that's with him going into this new Beyond. It's probably dark side, like you said. Like, it just makes all the sense in the world that would be the case. And we've speculated, me and you, for a while that we want this to happen.
Yeah,
I just think it makes too much sense.
Yeah, it's best case scenario at this point. Again, the show's going to be good no matter what, but it's going to be like a cherry on top if Ezra Bridger returns to the dark side. And what makes for a better plot, honestly? I mean, you have Ahsoka Tano risking everything potentially to go to this new place. Like, she's leaving behind all the rebels. She's leaving behind the Galactic Civil War where she knows that she could be of help.
I do have a question, though.
But let me say this. Wouldn't it make for a good plot, though, for her to, again, risk everything to show up in this new place only to find Ezra as potentially even more of a threat than what Vader could be if he really is using this dark side power?
Yeah.
And then no wonder she has to stay there. And then that almost makes perfect sense of why she's not involved with any of the other events potentially in the sequel trilogy. But I'll save that for a question here in a second. Finish your last thought and we can move on.
My question is, I guess with this new Beyond, are we going to have it? We understand it's going to be like magic and everything. My question is, I guess with this new Beyond, from what we know, we think so? It's outside the realm of what we know, right? It's not in this necessarily same universe. So is it kind of like not time travel, but I'm just going to use it for this word. Like, is it kind of like time travel essentially? Is what they're going to do?
No, I don't think it's necessarily out of the Star Wars universe. I think what they're saying is it's just never been explored in the Star Wars universe. Okay. So it's out there. It's just not been a part of.
It's probably farther than what we know from when she gets to the sequels. That's why she's maybe there. That's okay.
Well, I know that like the unknown regions consist of Exegol from the sequel trilogy, and it took a Sith Wayfinder to get there. So and that was like apparently supposed to be really difficult. Yeah. So I'm wondering how they're going to start. Like, if it's difficult to find that, they're acting like this new Beyond is going to be even more difficult to find. So I'm like, how is Ahsoka going? How did Ezra get there? Ezra and Thrawn get there, and then how is Ahsoka going to be finding it? But this is kind of a perfect segue to my next question for you. So there's been a lot of talk about potentially, Disney bringing back the sequel trilogy characters and kind of extending the sequel trilogy, so to speak, with their next slate of movies. It sounds like the next 3 movies potentially on the Star Wars docket that will be released are, in fact, the sequel trilogy. What do you think about that? Because I feel like we might have differing thoughts on more sequel trilogy movies and content.
I just... part of me understands the business of it, where it's like, okay, they made the sequel trilogy, right? And then you're going to push forward more sequel content and all this. But the fan side of me is saying, looking at the business and being like, do you not understand where your fans heads are at? Like, the sequel trilogy was so divisive. I understand people like it. I understand people have a great time with it. And those people are great and they can watch it how they please, just like prequel fans and just like original trilogy fans. We can all watch the things that we love. I'm not saying that. But my problem is that there are less people that like the sequels than there's basically more haters on the sequels than there are people that like the sequels.
Yeah.
And my problem with it is like they know this is too divisive. I say give it the prequel treatment at least and give it 10 to 15 years before you even make another sequel stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know why you're like, I want to do it now. Like, I feel like they're just being tone deaf and being like, oh, we got to do something with these characters. And I'm just like, I just don't like the idea. I know we said in the past that we would probably rather, I think we mentioned it on a past couple episodes, like we would rather see them do the sequels than go anywhere else. But now that now that we kind of got the Ahsoka stuff, I'm like, why can't you do something like that?
Yes. Well,
And
2 things.
that's my problem is like Dave is at least innovative enough and be like, we're going to try something totally new. Like,
Well, okay, so 2 things on that though. Number 1, you set me up the perfect pitch, so I have to swing at it. Is you're talking about the divisiveness of the sequels and just the discourse surrounding it. And for all of our people listening right now, however many people that may be, that's why this show is called Star Wars Politics. We want to discuss those differences in opinions in a non-toxic, cordial way. And so I just wanted to explain that's why Star Wars Politics is the way it is. We're just fans having discussions about Star Wars. That's the whole point of this show.
Yeah.
Number 2, why can't you have the Ahsoka stuff that we just talked about and have the sequel trilogy? Do you think that's not possible? Do you think they're mutually exclusive? Or because to me, it's the perfect way to make the sequel trilogy better, potentially, is by bringing in this stuff that we're probably all Star Wars fans are mostly going to like.
Yes,
Because let me say this. The thing is and I teased this in the last video, is that we're working our way towards a massive Star Wars event. That's what it seems like. That's what everybody's saying, and that's what all the articles that I'm reading would suggest.
Filoniverse, that's really what it is.
Filoniverse. I used to think prior to last week, prior to this article coming out, I used to think that this massive Star Wars project event in-game like scenario with Thrawn potentially being the Thanos of Star Wars. I used to think that this was coming before the sequel trilogy. Now I'm almost 100% convinced that it's coming after the sequel trilogy and potentially much later after the sequel trilogy. What I'm hoping is
makes you say that.
Well, a few things. So everyone always says, is Ahsoka dead? Is Ahsoka dead? Because in The Rise of Skywalker, you hear Ahsoka's voice. Okay? So point number 1, she's been to the world between worlds, and she's going to this new place called the New Beyond. Okay? We already know time works differently in the world between worlds, and I'm willing to bet that time works differently in this place called the New Beyond. So I'm hoping that she can communicate with Rey as if she is dead, but she's not really dead. Okay?
Okay.
So there's one way Ahsoka could still be alive. And then I think that I don't think, if you're talking about scope, okay, and you have the sequel trilogy, and yes, there was poor planning. You're talking about a massive Star Wars event that's going to come before the sequel trilogy, and they just don't talk about any of it in the sequel trilogy. Like, again, I know the planning.
Just answered your own question. There's no planning there, so they wouldn't know.
So they wouldn't know. But we're talking Dave Filoni and John Favreau here, so they know, and they know that you can't just leave that unexplained in the sequels. So the only way to get around that is to make it after the sequels.
Interesting. Okay.
And then you lump in all the characters potentially. You have Rey and Ahsoka and potentially Finn if John Boyega comes back, and all these, the Mando, Boba Fett, potentially all these people who are still alive, even though it's kind of a stretch for some of those characters because you are talking about a 30-year difference from like the timeline we're currently in with the Mando and the sequel trilogy. But I think that this massive Star Wars event is going to come after the sequels, and I think that this is the perfect way to tie everything in.
If they do something like, I'm just gonna call it Star Wars Endgame, do something like that. Like, I'm just gonna call it that right now. If they do something like that, I'm fine with it. The problem, if it's all one thing, they could kind of coalesce with it, I guess, and fans will be more or less happy, just because they're probably gonna make, in my mind, if they're gonna do it, Ahsoka needs to be the lead. I'm sorry, like, she needs to be the lead of it.
Well, she can be the lead with Rey, and I personally would be fine with that. Like, make both people happy. Give everybody a toy.
Ahsoka needs to teach Rey some things before we even get that. I'm not calling her a Mary Sue. She's kind of Mary Sue.
That's another YouTube short. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. Anyways, I guess my point is, like, Ahsoka kind of needs to be the head of it in order for me to kind of get bored with it.
There's so many things, though. We've talked about so many things.
But if they're doing two separate things and working up to that, I feel like fans, and this is just my opinion, where I see the fandom, is we're going to do everything that Dave Filoni wants, and then everything else Disney does, and that it's not Dave doing it, and not being a head director, head writer, head producer, head something in there. Then I feel like every fan is just going to kind of dismiss it and be like, well, if it leads up to this one event, that's great, but we're going to watch everything that Dave does and show that we love Dave and not your product. That's how I feel like everything was probably going to go.
I think that the force is moving at Disney.
No.
Okay. I think that there are major changes that are coming, not only to people, like, not only to leadership, but I think the projects are going to start going, like, I think at this point you have enough data from both social media and just actual hard data of viewership of these shows that Disney should be able to make an educated decision on which direction to go and how to move forward with Star Wars.
I personally think they're too stupid to make that decision because we haven't heard anything about it. So, like,
well, they don't want to talk about it because they know every time they talk about a project, it doesn't happen. But I'm just telling you, like, yes, if we would have talked about this 2 weeks ago, I would have been right there with you. But I just have this feeling that they're going to start moving, like the New Beyond, the Skeleton, like all of these things make so much sense. And then when I hear that,
but that's Dave's projects.
Yes, but Dave's also an executive producer and creative director now. He will have his hand in everything in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And honestly, everyone always talks about where to go next with the movies, and I don't think it doesn't make any sense to me personally to just leave the sequel trilogy characters behind, even though I don't like the sequels. It doesn't make sense for me just to leave them behind. You have to move forward with that story. But you're gonna I have not lost hope. I have not lost hope yet.
My next question to you about the sequels is, do you think it's kind of stupid that they marketed that as being the Skywalker saga, and then Rey calls herself a Skywalker, and then we're going to be like, yes, we're continuing her story. So is she part of the Skywalker saga? I'm really confused now.
Listen, I've told you before that the perfect way to make that line better, honestly, the whole movie and the whole trilogy better, is to create a new faction of Force users led by Ahsoka Tano and Rey, okay, and call them Skywalkers. That's the perfect legacy for Anakin Skywalker, who is supposed to bring balance to the Force. A faction of Jedi, gray Jedi, who are called Skywalkers. It sounds stupid, but I think it would work. And you have them be the new Jedi Order. That being said, I would love for there to be other factions of Force users as well. Give me the traditional Jedi. Bring in somebody like, I don't know, some Jedi who is like, I want that. It could be a completely new person who is like, somebody who wants to uphold the tradition. So then you have the more religious, kind of the more religious, what's the word I'm looking for? Legalistic side of the light side of the Force users. You have the Skywalker faction led by Ahsoka, who is the middle ground, and then you have a dark side, potentially source of evil, of magic and dark side Force powers, led by Ezra Bridger, to be this kind of new path moving forward for the sequel trilogy. I'm leaving it at that. Because we got one more thing we want to talk about, and this is more up your alley. So, Jedi Survivor gameplay footage trailer has released.
Mm-hmm.
Two kind of questions.
Okay.
What do you think about it? And who the heck is the guy on the back to take? Go.
So the gameplay, the trailer and the gameplay look absolutely amazing for that. The criticisms that I have been reading on the first game, which I'm like, okay, I can get behind some of the criticisms, but when I was playing it, I'm like, what are people talking about? But then I started reading more, and the more criticisms that they had, I'm like, oh, okay, no, I can see where the first game kind of like lags off and like kind of repeats itself basically. Mm-hmm. And that's like with the combat and everything, they totally improved that. They improved kind of the Force abilities of Cal, because he's now a Jedi Knight, or probably Jedi Master at this point. Probably more Jedi Knight, if anything.
He looks more mature. I think that was good artistic decision, is to make him not only look more mature in terms of his Force abilities, but the facial hair. He just looks like.
I feel like this is just me. I feel like every guy in Star Wars just has to have a beard to be like, he's older, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, it works though. I mean,
that's
visually
just
speaking.
that's just how the world works, but
yeah.
And how nature works in reality. But yeah, the gameplay looks cool. The trailer looks cool. They pretty much expanded on everything that I feel like I've read and heard about for the criticisms of the first one.
The guy in the back to tank.
The guy in the back to tank. So
I'll tell you who I want it to be, but tell me who you actually think.
No, I want you to go with your thing, because I have like kind of a spiel on it.
So of course, I never played the first game. What I want to do is I want to go and just watch all the I'm sure there's a montage of cutscenes on YouTube. So I'm like, I'll get the story that way, and I'll probably do the same thing for Jedi Survivor. Looks like a fun game. I just really never got into it. The person I want it to be, and this is just me skimming on YouTube. I really want it to be Sifo Dyas.
I don't think it's Sifo.
Well, I know. I just want it to be Sifo Dyas.
That's an interesting. I've heard that as well. I just don't think it's him.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's an out there suggestion. I would just really love his perception. Like he talked, like the person in the trailer talks about being betrayed. That could mean many things. Like the Jedi were betrayed by the clone, like by the whole galaxy, essentially.
But my question is, if it was Sifo Dyas, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was betrayed, so he would have been betrayed by Palpatine, of course.
Well,
so I guess
Dooku was his friend.
Okay, Dooku, Sifo Dyas, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a Jedi, right? He was good.
Sifo Dyas was a Jedi, and he starts going a little crazy, and Dooku Jedi lost. He starts to lose his mind because he toys with, I believe he toys with like this dark side entity.
Yeah.
That's like encompassed in some artifact or something. It's been a while since I've listened to it. But he starts going crazy, and that's ultimately what I think it leads to his demise. And he goes and initiates the creation of the clones.
Sure.
Dooku betrays him, and I believe it's understood that Dooku kills him. But
my question if it was Sifo, then why would he just kind of be immediate, or at least from the trailer, it seems like he's just immediately the bad guy. And I'm like, well, if he was I understand he was toying with the Jedi or the dark side thing, but if he would have died, like, don't you think he would have be like on the, if he knew who stabbed him or killed him or whatever, like, wouldn't he be immediately on the light side? That's just kind of what I get from the trailer is he's
Rage. I don't know.
Yeah.
Rage, fear is a path to the dark side. Okay, but forget that. Our time is running short here. Who do you think it is? Give me the more realistic person.
Once again, skimming on YouTube, I think the person that it's going to be is someone from the High Republic, which is interesting because I've read or heard that apparently in the High Republic that some of them get like cryogenic chambered in the bacta tank basically, and is kind of like in sleep mode for 400 years before the prequels, something like that. So I think it's like a guy from the High Republic. I don't know the name or anything like that, but I feel like it's someone from the High Republic era because it's kind of from the golden robes, kind of pure part of, I guess, the history of Star Wars.
Final theory here, as again we're kind of running out of time. Final theory.
Mm-hmm.
What if this person is from the High Republic era, was captured by the Sith, and was experimented and like operated on in some sense to turn them into some dark side entity, and like just kind of forgotten like experiment that the Sith was doing, perhaps even a cloning experiment. We know everything's tying into the clones. I don't know. It's a thought.
I'm not opposed to it. I really don't know. I'm just as intrigued about the question as anyone is about the game. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting thought.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's probably not going to happen. I'm just throwing crap out there at this point.
You're just balling.
I think everybody wants to know who they are, and in typical Star Wars fashion, it's just going to be some random person that nobody's ever heard of.
Who I heard is it's not even like the game Jedi Survivor. The title of it is suggested. Everyone thinks, oh, it's about Cal. No, I think it's about the other person.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Which I heard about that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So
yeah, that makes sense. I bet that's probably what they end up doing, is something like that. But I think that's a good place.
Any other news or is that pretty much it for today?
No, I think that's pretty much it. We're reaching our 30-minute mark, so I think we call it here. We appreciate everybody watching. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button for future content. We're going to be trying to release these weekly, kind of more episodic type of videos at the end of the week, just for a full discussion of all the things that we discussed during the week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications. That way you're getting notified when we have a video that's dropping. So
are we letting them know that we're doing I think you just said it, but we're doing episodic videos and then we're doing the full length video at the end of the week?
Yeah, that'll be the format. Is we'll release the shorter videos during the week, and then the longer video at the end of the week, to kind of piggyback off the small, like to kind of expand on some of the things that we discuss in the shorter videos during the week. So, all right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I think we call it there. Again, thank you to everybody who has been watching, and remember, these are the fans you're looking for.